The alarm screamed through every corridor of Harmony 7 station. Security Officer Jothic dropped her morning meal and ran toward the command center, her forearms already reaching for her equipment belt. She had worked at the Galactic Council's main station for 15 years, and she had never heard this particular alarm before. It was the sound reserved for impossible things. "Report!" she barked as she burst through the doors. The sensor operator, a young Talari with shaking hands, pointed at the main display. "Ma'am, a ship just appeared. Right there. No warning, no energy buildup, nothing. It just appeared." Jothic's primary eyes narrowed while her secondary eyes scanned the data feeds. The ship was old, very old. Its design matched human construction from nearly a century ago. The identification code that pulsed weakly from its transmitters made her breath catch in her throat. "That's impossible," she whispered. The Prometheus vanished 83 years ago. Every species in the galaxy knew the story of the UESS Prometheus. The human deep space exploration vessel had been one of Earth's most ambitious missions. Sent to map the regions beyond the Edge Nebula, humanity was still new to the galactic community back then, eager and reckless in the way young civilizations often were. The Prometheus and its crew of 47 had crossed into uncharted space and simply disappeared. No distress call. No debris. No trace. The human government had searched for 5 years before finally holding a memorial service. The crew were declared dead, their names carved into a monument on Earth's moon. Now the ship was back. "Get me a full scan," Jothic ordered. "And send an emergency alert to the Council. Nobody goes near that vessel until we know what we're dealing with." The scan results came back within minutes, and they made no sense. The ship was intact, its hull showing signs of age, but no battle damage. Power systems ran on minimal automated protocols. Life support was active but reading empty. Most disturbing of all, the chronometer embedded in the ship's computer showed a date from only 3 years after it had vanished, not 83. Jothic assembled a boarding team. Protocol demanded representatives from 3 different species, all trained in hazardous environment operations. She chose carefully. Morg, a massive granite warrior whose people were nearly impossible to kill. Physician Lyra, a Sivari with 6 limbs perfect for zero-gravity medical work. And herself. They suited up in full containment gear and took a shuttle across the empty space between the station and the ghost ship. The Prometheus floated in the void like a grave marker. Its white hull had turned gray, with cosmic dust. The Earth insignia on its side was faded but still visible, a blue circle with green continents, wrapped in olive branches. Humans always did love their symbolism. "Docking in 30 seconds, Morg announced, his deep voice rumbling through the comm system. "Hull integrity looks solid. We should be able to pressurize the airlock." The shuttle connected with a metallic clang that echoed through both vessels. Jothic checked her scanner one more time, then nodded. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding, old ghost." The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The air that escaped from the Prometheus smelled wrong, stale, and cold, like opening a tomb. Jothic's suit sensors immediately flagged the atmosphere as breathable but ancient. No biological contaminants, but the oxygen had been recycled so many times it barely qualified as fresh. They floated through the corridors in zero gravity. Emergency lighting flickered on as they passed, triggered by motion sensors that had waited 8 decades to detect movement again. The ship was a time capsule. Personal items still floated in the air, photographs, data pads, a child's toy that one crew member must have brought from home. Everything was preserved exactly as it had been left. "This is wrong," Lyra whispered. "Where are the bodies?" That was the question that made Jothic's skin crawl beneath her scales. Ships didn't just empty themselves. Even if the crew had abandoned the Prometheus, there should be signs, escape pods missing, airlocks breached, something. Instead, it looked like everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routines. They found the first body in the medical bay. Dr. Richard Hayes, according to the name tag on his preserved uniform. He lay on a medical bed, his face peaceful, as if sleeping, but he had been dead for a very long time. No signs of violence, she reported. No disease markers. His biological systems just stopped. All at once, like someone flipped a switch, they found the others throughout the ship. The entire crew, all 47 of them, dead in their stations or quarters. Every single one showed the same impossible characteristic: they had all died at exactly the same moment, their bodies simply ceasing to function with no medical explanation. Jothic felt a deep unease growing in her chest. This wasn't a disaster. This was something far stranger and more frightening. The captain's log was still accessible. Jothic pulled the data and listened to Captain Elena Vasquez's final entries. The captain's voice was calm at first, excited even, as she described their discovery beyond the Edge Nebula. They had found something incredible, an ancient space station orbiting a dead star, built by a civilization that predated every known species in the galaxy. "We're calling them the Architects," Captain Vasquez said in one log entry, her voice filled with wonder. "The station is billions of years old, but its technology still functions. We've found storage devices, power systems that we can't even begin to understand. And something else. Something in the central chamber that our scans can't penetrate." The next entries grew darker. The crew had entered the central chamber. They had found something the captain called the arsenal. "Weapons," she said. "Weapons that shouldn't exist. Weapons that violated the known laws of physics." The final log entry was brief. Captain Vasquez's voice shook as she spoke. "We're bringing them back. God forgive us. But we're bringing them back." The Architects left instructions. They left warnings. But they also left a message: these weapons are the only things that can stop what's coming. We have to warn the Council. We have to warn everyone. The Vorgrim are real. And they're coming back. Where? 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 The log ended. Jothic stood in the silent bridge, her mind racing. She had never heard of the Vorgrim. The name meant nothing to her. But the fear in the captain's voice was real. "Jothic," Morg's voice crackled over the comm. "You need to come to the cargo hold. Now." She found her team standing at the entrance to the main cargo bay, staring through the observation window. The cargo hold was enormous, designed to carry research samples and equipment, but instead of scientific instruments, it was filled with objects that made Jothic's training and experience feel suddenly inadequate. The weapons were beautiful in a terrible way. They looked organic and mechanical at the same time, as if someone had taught metal to grow like a living thing. Each one was different. Some were small enough to hold in 2 hands. Others were massive structures that filled entire sections of the hold. They pulsed with a faint inner light. Colors that shifted through spectrums. Jothic's eyes couldn't quite process. Warning labels covered every surface in the cargo bay. They were written in human languages: English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, but also in other scripts that predated humanity by billions of years. Jothic could only read a few words of the ancient text, but those few words were enough to make her blood run cold. Final measure. Ultimate price. Reality's edge. "Don't touch anything," she ordered, though nobody looked eager to do so. Lyra was scanning one of the smaller devices. "The energy readings are impossible. This thing isn't drawing power from any source I can detect, but it's generating enough energy to power a small star. And the readings are strange. I'm detecting particles that shouldn't exist, forces that have no name in our physics databases." Morg pointed at one of the larger weapons. "Look at the mounting brackets. They're designed for human ships. The crew meant to bring these back and install them as weapons." A central console stood in the middle of the cargo bay. Jothic approached it carefully, her scanner held before her like a shield. The console was active, running on some power source that had lasted for 8 decades without dimming. A screen flickered to life as she approached. "Warning," a synthetic voice spoke in perfect council standard. Unauthorized access detected. This cargo is classified under Architect Protocol 7. Only designated human military personnel may access these systems. I am Security Officer Jothic of the Galactic Council, she said carefully. The crew of this vessel is deceased. I need information about this cargo. The screen flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a face appeared. Not a human face, but something else. It looked almost like a digital ghost, features constantly shifting and reforming as if the image couldn't decide what it wanted to be. AI fragment detected, Lyra whispered. It's not a full artificial intelligence. It's just a piece of one, running on damaged systems. Who are you? Jothic asked. Was. The Prometheus, AI, the fragmented voice said. I am damaged. Memory cores corrupted. But I remember the important things. I remember what we found. I remember what they told us. The architects? Yes. They gave us a choice. Take the weapons and risk becoming like them. Leave the weapons and die like everyone else. Captain Vasquez chose survival. She chose to bring the arsenal home. What happened to the crew? The AI fragment was quiet for a long moment. The weapons are not meant for living things to transport. They exist partially outside normal space-time. The crew's biology could not handle the transition. They died instantly when we activated the return protocol. I tried to save them. I failed. I have been failing for 83 years. Guiding this ship home while my systems degraded. Hoping someone would find us before I forgot why this mattered. Jothic felt a wave of sadness for the broken AI, alone with its cargo of death for nearly a century. What are these weapons for? What are the Vorgrim? The screen flickered wildly. The Vorgrim are, were, will be. Time is difficult for me now. They come from dark space. They consume civilizations. They consumed the architects, forced them to transcend physical existence to survive. The weapons are designed to fight them. Nothing else can stop them. But using them changes reality. Using them is dying in a different way. Before Jothic could ask another question, one of the weapons activated. She hadn't touched anything, hadn't given any command. But the device nearest to her suddenly blazed with light. A holographic display erupted into the air above it, showing a star map of the entire galaxy. Dozens of systems were marked in red, scattered throughout Council space. Earth was marked. Harmony 7 was marked. Every major civilization's home world glowed with crimson warning lights. At the center of the display, a countdown appeared. The numbers were written in symbols from 1,000 different languages. But they all said the same thing. 47 days remaining. Remaining until what? Jothic demanded. The AI fragment's voice was fading. Until they arrive. Until the Vorgrim scouts detect your civilization's energy signatures. Until the choice the architects faced becomes yours. I'm sorry. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you next. I'm sorry. We tried to warn you. We tried to bring you the only weapons that can save you. But now you must decide if salvation is worth the price. The hologram vanished. The cargo bay fell silent, except for the hum of ancient systems. Jothic stood frozen, staring at the weapons that might save the galaxy or doom it, knowing that she had just become responsible for the most important decision in the history of the Galactic Council. Behind her, Morg spoke quietly. Jothic touched her communicator with one hand, while her other 3 hands unconsciously reached for weapons that suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. We report to the Council, and then we prepare for war. The Council chamber on Harmony 7 had been built to inspire awe and unity. 47 species, each represented by their ambassadors, sat in concentric circles beneath a dome that showed the stars beyond. Today, that unity was breaking apart. Humanity must surrender these weapons immediately. Ambassador Krell of the Anthari Collective slammed 3 of his tentacles against his podium. We have the doctrine of measured progress, for a reason. No civilization should possess technology they did not develop themselves. The human ambassador, an elderly woman named Sarah Chen, stood calmly despite the chaos around her. She was small compared to most species present, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber. The Prometheus crew gave their lives to bring these weapons home. They died believing they were saving us all. From a threat you refuse to acknowledge. A threat we have no evidence for. Krell shot back. Ancient warnings from dead civilizations, and the words of a damaged AI? This is not evidence. This is mythology. Jothic stood in the security section, watching the debate spiral. She had presented her report 6 hours ago. Since then, the council had done nothing but argue. Some species wanted the weapons destroyed. Others wanted them locked away and studied. A few, the more militaristic ones, wanted them divided among the council fleet. Nobody could agree on anything except that humans should not be allowed to keep them. Ambassador Chen raised her hand, waiting for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, she spoke softly. We did not ask for this responsibility, but my government will not surrender weapons that might be our only defense against an existential threat. Not when the countdown says we have 46 days left. Countdown to what? Demanded the Savari representative. We've sent scouts to the Edge Nebula. There's nothing there, except empty space and radiation. Yet, Chen said quietly, there's nothing there yet. The debate continued for hours. Jothic eventually left, disgusted by the politics. She had work to do. Real work. In the secure laboratory they had set up, she found an unexpected visitor examining the weapons through containment fields. He was human. Young, with dark hair and tired eyes. He wore civilian clothes, but carried himself with a military bearing. Who are you? Jothic demanded, her hands moving toward her sidearm. This area is restricted. The man turned, startled. Dr. Marcus Webb? I'm sorry. I thought they told you I was coming. Ambassador Chen arranged it. I'm a physicist specializing in exotic matter and dimensional mechanics. I'm also... He hesitated. I'm also... Captain Elena Vasquez's grandson. Jothic relaxed slightly. She had heard the name. Dr. Webb had published several papers that challenged conventional understanding of space-time. Some called him brilliant. Others called him reckless. Your grandmother died bringing these weapons back. I know. Marcus's voice was heavy. I was 12 when the Prometheus vanished. She used to send me messages every week during the mission, videos of the strange things they found in deep space. Then the messages stopped, and I spent the next 70 years wondering what happened to her. He looked at the weapons. Now I know. She found something that scared her badly enough to risk everything bringing it home. The logs, Jothic said, pulling up a datapad. We recovered them all. You should see them. You should know what your grandmother discovered. She showed him the recordings. Marcus sat silently as his grandmother's face appeared on the screen, younger than he remembered her, filled with excitement that slowly turned to horror. In the first logs, Captain Vasquez described the architect station in detail. It was a ring structure, thousands of kilometers in diameter, orbiting a star that had burned out billions of years ago. The station still had power, drawn from some source the crew couldn't identify. The architecture was impossible corridors that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the 3 the crew could perceive. Rooms that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Technology that responded to thought rather than touch. We found the central chamber today, Captain Vasquez said in one log, her face lit by strange lights. It's massive. The walls are covered in warnings written in hundreds of languages, including some we recognize from dead civilizations. The Talari script is here. The ancient Kresh symbols, even some that match Earth languages from before recorded history. It's like whoever built this place wanted to make absolutely sure every possible visitor could read the warnings. The next log showed the crew examining what they found inside the chamber. The weapons were stored in stasis fields. each one labeled with detailed instructions in multiple languages. But more than the weapons, the crew had found something else: a digital archive. The architects had left their entire history recorded for whoever found them. Marcus watched as his grandmother played sections of the archive. They saw the architects themselves, not as they appeared in their biological forms, those were long gone, but as they had recorded themselves in their final days. They were tall, graceful beings with 4 arms and crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbows. They had built a civilization that spanned 100,000 stars. They had mastered technology that made current council science look primitive. And then the Vorgrim came. The archive showed them if they could even be called ships. They were organic, constantly shifting forms that looked like dark bruises against the stars. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations disappeared into them. They grew larger with every system they devoured. The architects fought back. They built the weapons that now sat in the Prometheus cargo hold. Weapons that manipulated fundamental forces of reality itself. They had weapons that could reverse entropy, making young stars old and old stars collapse into black holes. They had weapons that could tear holes between dimensions, exiling entire fleets into spaces that didn't connect to normal reality. They had weapons that could slow or accelerate time in localized areas, making seconds stretch into centuries or compressing years into moments. The weapons worked. The Vorgrim were stopped, driven back to the dark spaces between galaxies. But victory had a cost. Every time we used the weapons, we damaged reality itself, one architect said in the recording, their voice translated by the archive's AI. Space-time is not as stable as we believed. It can be torn. It can be poisoned. We won the war, but our home space became uninhabitable. The laws of physics no longer work correctly in our systems. Matter behaves strangely. Time flows at different rates. Our people began to die, unable to exist in the universe we had broken. The architects had no choice. They uploaded themselves into digital storage, becoming patterns of information rather than biological beings. They built stations like this one throughout the galaxy, hidden in remote places, storing the weapons that had saved and doomed them. They left warnings, they left instructions, and they left a message for whoever might need the weapons next. Captain Vasquez's final log showed her standing in the central chamber, surrounded by the arsenal. The architects detected something before they transcended: energy signatures from dark space, the same types they recorded during the Vorgrim invasion. The signals are weak now, but growing stronger. They calculate the Vorgrim will return within a century, drawn by the increasing energy output of younger civilizations who use faster-than-light travel more recklessly than the architects ever did. She looked directly at the camera, directly at her future grandson. We're bringing the weapons home. I know the council will debate. I know they'll argue. But when the Vorgrim arrive, they won't care about politics or protocols. They'll just consume. These weapons are our only chance. I hope whoever watches this understands. Sometimes survival requires terrible choices. The log ended. Marcus sat in silence, tears running down his face. Jothic gave him a moment before speaking. Your grandmother was brave. She was terrified, Marcus corrected. You can see it in her eyes. She knew what these weapons cost the architects, but she brought them anyway because the alternative was extinction. He wiped his face and stood. I need to study these. Really study them. If we're going to use them, we need to understand them completely. The council hasn't decided if anyone will use them, Jothic pointed out. Marcus gave her a sad smile. The council will decide exactly 1 second after the Vorgrim arrive and destroy their first world. Decisions are easy when the alternative is death. My grandmother knew that. That's why she didn't wait for permission. Over the following days, Jothic and Marcus worked together, examining the weapons and the architect archives. They discovered terrible truths. The weapons weren't powered by conventional means. They drew energy from space-time itself, essentially feeding on the fabric of reality. Every use left scars regions where physics worked differently, where matter couldn't form properly, where life couldn't exist. The architects had used the weapons extensively during their war. They had won, but their victory left 50 star systems completely uninhabitable. The damage was permanent. Even after billions of years, those systems remained dead zones where ships that entered simply ceased to exist. It's like a poison, Marcus explained, showing Jothic his calculations. Reality can heal from small wounds. A single weapon, fired once, the universe recovers in a few thousand years. But extensive use? Multiple weapons? In the same region? The damage compounds. It becomes permanent. The architects didn't just save their civilization, they made it impossible for themselves to continue existing in normal space. Jothic examined the data, her mind working through the implications. So using these weapons to stop the Vorgrim might save us from one threat while creating another. Exactly. We trade one extinction for another, just slower. An alert interrupted their discussion. The Council fleet had detected something at the Edge Nebula. A scout ship had gone silent. The last transmission showed something emerging from dark space, organic shapes that moved against the stars like oil spreading across water. Jothic and Marcus rushed to the command center. The recordings from the scout ship were being played on every screen. They showed 3 Vorgrim vessels, smaller than the ones in the architect archives but unmistakably the same. The scout ship's weapons had no effect. The energy beams simply absorbed into the Vorgrim ships, making them grow slightly larger. The scout ship's final moments were brief. The Vorgrim vessels surrounded it, and then it simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in an explosion, just gone, as if it had never been there. Where the ship had been, empty space remained, but sensors showed that even the atoms that had made up the vessel had vanished completely. The council chamber erupted in panic. Species that had argued against the Vorgrim's existence now demanded immediate action. The countdown showed 41 days remaining. It became clear what the countdown represented: the time until the Vorgrim main fleet would arrive, drawn by the energy signatures of Council space. Ambassador Chen stood before the Council again. The Prometheus crew died to bring us these weapons. The architects sacrificed their entire civilization to create them. Now we face the same choice they did. The unchanged, or survive transformed. I vote for survival. At what cost? Krell demanded. If we use these weapons, we become like the architects. We poison the galaxy. We create dead zones that last forever. If we don't use them, Chen said quietly, there won't be a galaxy left to poison. The Vorgrim don't leave dead zones. They leave nothing at all. The vote was close. But ultimately, the Council agreed. The weapons would be distributed to the fleet. Humanity would receive a portion for their own defense. But there was one condition: someone had to learn how to use them without destroying reality in the process. Marcus volunteered. His grandmother had brought the weapons home. Now it fell to him to make them usable. As he studied the ancient instructions, he whispered to himself, I hope you were right, Grandma. I hope survival is worth this price. In the dark spaces beyond the Edge Nebula, more Vorgrim ships emerged. The countdown continued its remorseless march toward zero, and across Council space, species that had never known true fear began to understand exactly what was coming. Earth had changed in the weeks since the Prometheus returned. Cities that had never known martial law now operated under emergency protocols. Every news broadcast showed the same images: the Vorgrim ships at the Edge Nebula, the destroyed scout vessel, and the countdown that now read 32 days. Marcus stood in the observation deck of the Lunar Research Facility, looking down at his home planet. The blue and green world seemed so fragile from up here, so vulnerable. Behind him, in the sealed laboratories, teams of scientists worked around the clock, studying the architect's weapons. They had made progress, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Dr. Webb? A technician approached carefully. The council liaison is here to see you. Oh, Jothic entered the observation deck, carrying a datapad and wearing an expression Marcus had learned to recognize more bad news. She had become a frequent visitor over the past weeks, shuttling between council space and human territory. Their unlikely friendship had formed quickly, built on shared purpose and mounting dread. Another attack? Marcus asked. 3 more colonies went dark overnight, Jothic confirmed. No distress calls. No wreckage. The Vorgrim consumed them completely. The council fleet tried to engage at the 3rd colony. We lost 47 ships without destroying a single Vorgrim vessel. She pulled up footage on her datapad. Watch. The battle recording showed council warships firing every weapon they possessed. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids simply made the Vorgrim ships pulse with absorbed energy. Missiles that could crack planets passed through them like stones through water. Even antimatter weapons, the most powerful conventional arms the council possessed, were swallowed whole. They adapt, Marcus observed. Every weapon we use, they learn to consume. The Architect's archives mention this. The Vorgrim evolved specifically to fight technological civilizations. They turned our own weapons into food. The council is desperate, Jothic said quietly. There's talk of using the Architect's weapons now, before the main fleet arrives. Strike preemptively, while we still have time to organize. Marcus shook his head. We're not ready. We still don't understand the full cost. Every simulation I run shows the same result. Yes, we can hurt the Vorgrim with these weapons, but we'll devastate reality in the process. Reality doesn't matter if we're all dead, doesn't it? Marcus turned to face her fully. I've been studying the Architect's final records, the ones they left for themselves, not for future civilizations. Do you know what they called themselves at the end? Not the Architects. Not the Builders. They called themselves the Orphaned. They won their war, Jothic, but they had nowhere left to live. They existed in digital storage for millions of years before finally letting themselves fade into nothing. Is that really victory? Jothic's secondary eyes closed, a sign of deep distress among her people. Then, what do we do? Wait for the Vorgrim to consume us? Die with clean consciences? Before Marcus could answer, alarms screamed throughout the facility. The technician who had announced Jothic's arrival rushed back, his face pale. Doctors, you need to see this. Now. They ran to the main laboratory. Every screen showed the same alert, unauthorized activation of one of the Architect's weapons. Not in the secure facility. Not under controlled conditions. The weapon had been activated in space, near the Edge Nebula. Who authorized this? Marcus demanded. No one. The lead technician gasped. It's the Promethean Front. They stole one of the smaller weapons during transport last week. We thought they were just terrorists making demands. We didn't think they could actually use it. The Promethean Front had formed within days of the Prometheus's return. They were human extremists who believed that the Architect's weapons represented humanity's chance to become the dominant force in the galaxy. Their manifesto was simple and terrifying. Use the weapons first. Ask questions later. They had supporters across Earth. People who were tired of being the newest and weakest species in the council. Now they had made their move. The screens showed the weapon firing. It was beautiful and horrible at the same time. A beam of light that wasn't really light lanced across space, hitting the Vorgrim scout fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, reality itself seemed to scream. Space twisted. Time stuttered. The Vorgrim ships simply stopped existing, erased from reality so completely that even their past seemed to waver. But the weapon didn't stop there. The beam continued past its targets, carving a line through space. Everything it touched became wrong. Stars flickered and died. Planets broke apart, not from force, but from matter, forgetting how to hold itself together. A dead zone formed, spreading outward from the weapon's path, a region where physics no longer worked correctly. Marcus watched in horror as his worst predictions came true. The weapon's effect expanded, feeding on itself. What should have been a limited strike became something much worse. The dead zone grew to encompass 3 star systems before finally stabilizing. 3 systems that would remain uninhabitable forever. God help us, Marcus whispered. They didn't just attack the Vorgrim. They poisoned space itself. The Promethean Front broadcast a message immediately after. Their leader, a former military officer named Catherine Shaw, appeared on every channel. She stood in front of the stolen weapon, her face fierce and unrepentant. "We have shown the galaxy what humanity can do," Shaw declared. "The Vorgrim are not invincible. The Architect's weapons work. Yes, there was a cost. Yes, we damaged space. But we're alive, and the Vorgrim are dead. That's what matters. That's what survival looks like." The Council's response was immediate and furious. Human ships were ordered out of Council space. Trade agreements were suspended. Some species demanded humanity be quarantined. Their worlds blockaded until the stolen weapons were surrendered. The fragile unity that had formed in the face of the Vorgrim threat shattered. Marcus found himself summoned before both the Earth government and the Council. He stood in the Council chamber, now filled with representatives screaming for human blood, and tried to explain the magnitude of what had happened. "The dead zone is permanent," he said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Those 3 star systems are lost. Forever. But that's not the worst part. The weapon use left a scar in space-time that weakened the dimensional barriers. We've essentially created a beacon for the Vorgrim. They'll be drawn to the damaged areas like predators to blood and water." Ambassador Chen stood beside him, her face gray with exhaustion. "We did not authorize this action. The Promethean Front acted against our direct orders. They will be hunted down and brought to justice." "Justice." Krell's voice dripped with venom. "What justice can repair 3 dead star systems? What justice can undo the damage your species has caused? The same justice that will judge all of us if we don't find a better way," Marcus said, his voice suddenly sharp. "Yes. Humans made a terrible mistake, but we're the ones trying to find a solution. While you're all pointing fingers and assigning blame, I'm working on modifications to the weapons that might let us use them without destroying reality. Is anyone else doing that? Or are you all just waiting to die with moral superiority intact?" The chamber fell silent. Jothic stepped forward, her 4 arms spread in a gesture of peace. "Dr. Webb is right. Blame solves nothing. We have 28 days until the Vorgrim main fleet arrives. We can spend that time fighting each other. Or we can work together to survive." The vote was close, but eventually the Council agreed to continue cooperation. However, all Architect's weapons were placed under joint custody, with representatives from multiple species required to authorize any use. Humans were specifically banned from independent access. Marcus was allowed to continue his research, but under constant supervision. In the weeks that followed, Marcus worked himself to exhaustion. He barely slept, surviving on stimulants and desperation. Jothic stayed with him, bringing food he forgot to eat and forcing him to rest when his calculations became incoherent from fatigue. "I think I found something," Marcus said one night, his eyes red from staring at screens for 18 hours straight. "The weapons don't have to be used destructively. Look at this." He showed her calculations that made her head hurt. The weapons manipulated space-time by forcing energy states that shouldn't exist. But energy could be directed, shaped, controlled. Instead of using the weapons to destroy, they could potentially be used to create barriers, dimensional walls that separated normal space from the regions the Vorgrim occupied. "Imagine a cage," Marcus explained. "We don't kill the Vorgrim, we trap them. We create dimensional barriers that they can't cross, isolating them in dark space. The barriers would still damage reality, but the damage would be localized and controlled. The rest of the galaxy stays safe." "Can it work?" Jothic asked. "I don't know. The math suggests it's possible, But math and reality don't always agree when you're dealing with forces this extreme. He laughed bitterly. The architects never tried this approach. They were too busy fighting to think defensively. Jothic was about to respond when alerts blared again. More Vorgrim attacks. 5 colonies this time. The countdown showed 21 days remaining, but the attacks were accelerating. The Vorgrim weren't waiting for the deadline. They were coming now. Marcus pulled up the sensor data and felt his stomach drop. The Vorgrim weren't just attacking randomly. They were moving in a pattern. A spiral that would eventually converge on Harmony 7 Station. They knew where the Council headquarters was. They were coming for the heart of civilization. "We're out of time," Jothic said quietly. Marcus looked at his calculations, at the theories that might save them, or might doom them just as surely as the Vorgrim. "Then, we'd better make the time we have left count." In the secure labs, they began preparing for the desperate gamble that might be their only hope. Outside, Council forces engaged the Vorgrim in losing battles across a dozen systems, and in dark space, the main fleet drew closer. An armada of world-eaters that had ended civilizations before and would gladly end another. Marcus worked through the night, making adjustments to the weapons, praying his calculations were correct. Beside him, Jothic monitored the approaching threat, counting down the hours until they would either prove humanity's worth or confirm every species' worst fears about giving monkeys access to weapons that could crack reality itself. The price of power was becoming clear. The question was whether anyone would survive to pay it. The Vorgrim main fleet arrived early. The countdown had shown 7 days remaining when sensor arrays across Council space began screaming warnings. The enemy didn't care about humanity's timetables or careful preparations. They emerged from dark space in a wave of organic ships that made the scout vessels look like insects by comparison. Thousands of them, each the size of a small moon, moving with terrible purpose toward Harmony 7. Marcus was in the command center when the alerts came. He hadn't slept in 40 hours, surviving on coffee and raw determination. His modifications to the architect's weapons were complete, but untested. The theory was sound: create dimensional barriers instead of destroying the Vorgrim outright. In practice, they might trap everyone in a cage with hungry monsters, or tear a hole in reality that swallowed the galaxy. There was no way to know until they tried. "All Council forces are engaging," the tactical officer announced. His voice remained calm despite the madness on his screens. 3,000 ships from 47 species. It's the largest combined fleet in galactic history. Jothic stood beside Marcus, her forearms checking weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. She had been assigned to the Harmony 7 Defense Force, but she had refused to leave Marcus's side. "If your plan works, I want to be here to see it. If it fails, I'd rather die with a friend than alone in a command ship." Marcus wanted to say something meaningful, something worthy of the moment. But exhaustion and fear had stolen his eloquence. "Thanks for not thinking I'm crazy." "Oh, you're definitely crazy," Jothic said with a flash of dark humor. "But you're the good kind of crazy. The kind that might save us all." The battle began at the outer edges of the Harmony 7 system. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they possessed. Plasma weapons that could boil atmospheres, kinetic kill vehicles moving at relativistic speeds, fusion missiles that mimicked the death of stars. For a brief moment, space lit up like a new galaxy being born. The Vorgrim absorbed it all. Marcus watched in sick fascination as the enemy ships didn't dodge or defend. They simply opened themselves up and swallowed the incoming fire. Every weapon that hit them made them grow slightly larger, slightly more solid. They fed on energy itself. The Council's best weapons were just making them stronger. "They're adapting faster than the architect's records suggested," Marcus said, furiously typing calculations into his console. "They've learned from their last war. They're not just consuming energy now, they're consuming the fundamental forces the weapons use. Plasma, kinetic energy, nuclear fusion. It's all just different flavors of the same meal to them." The fleet tried different tactics. Some ships attempted ramming attacks, throwing themselves at the Vorgrim in desperate suicide runs. The Vorgrim simply opened like mouths and swallowed the ships whole. Other ships tried retreat, only to discover the Vorgrim were faster than they appeared. The organic vessels moved through space in ways that violated conventional physics, teleporting short distances or simply ceasing to exist in one location and appearing in another. "We're losing," the tactical officer reported unnecessarily. Everyone could see the casualty numbers climbing. The Council fleet was being systematically destroyed. Ambassador Chen entered the command center, her face set with grim determination. "Dr. Webb, the Council has authorized deployment of the Architect's weapons. All of them. No more half measures. We throw everything we have at them and hope it's enough." "Wait." Marcus held up a hand. "If we use them all at once, the combined effect will be catastrophic. We could destroy the Vorgrim, but we'll also destroy half the systems in Council space. The damage to space-time will be irreparable." Unquote. "Better than being consumed entirely," Chen replied. The vote was unanimous. Even the species that opposed the weapons before voted yes. Fear is a powerful motivator. Marcus looked at Jothic, who nodded slowly. They both knew this moment would come. When faced with extinction, species would do anything to survive. That's what the Architects had learned. That's what the Prometheus crew had understood. Now it was humanity's turn to make the impossible choice. "Give me one chance," Marcus said. "Let me try my approach first. The dimensional barriers. If I can isolate even a portion of the Vorgrim fleet, it might give us an advantage." Chen hesitated, but another alarm interrupted her response. A Vorgrim ship had broken through the defensive line. It was heading directly for Harmony 7 station. The massive organic vessel moved like a predator that had spotted wounded prey. "We're out of time," Chen said. "Do whatever you can. The rest of the fleet will deploy the weapons on my authorization. May whatever gods exist forgive us." Marcus and Jothic ran to the modified weapon they had prepared. It sat in a specially shielded chamber, its alien surface pulsing with colors that hurt to look at directly. Marcus had connected it to his personal console, linking his calculations and theories directly into the weapon's control systems. "The Architects never tried this," he muttered as he worked. "They were warriors. They thought in terms of attack and defense. But maybe that was their mistake. Maybe the answer isn't to fight force with force." His fingers flew across the holographic interface, inputting coordinates and energy parameters. The weapon began to hum, a sound that resonated in bones and teeth, as if reality itself was vibrating in protest. "What exactly are you doing?" Jothic asked, watching sensor readings that made no sense. "I'm creating a fold in space-time," Marcus explained while working. "Imagine taking a piece of paper and folding it so two distant points touch. That's essentially what faster-than-light travel does. But instead of folding space to travel, I'm folding it to separate. I'm creating a dimensional pocket, a region of space-time that exists adjacent to normal space, but can't be reached from it. And the Vorgrim? I'm going to fold the space they're in away from us, trap them in the pocket. They'll still exist, but they won't be able to reach normal space. It's not a cage, it's more like moving them to a parallel universe that only overlaps ours in carefully controlled ways. Will it work?" Marcus gave her a tired smile. "Ask me in 30 seconds. He initiated the sequence. The weapon fired, but not like the Promethean front's destructive blast. This was subtle, almost elegant. A pulse of energy spread outward from the weapon, expanding at the speed of light. Where it touched space, reality seemed to shimmer and split, like looking at the world through a prism. The Vorgrim ship heading for Harmony 7 suddenly stopped. It didn't slow down or turn away, it simply froze in place, as if someone had paused time. Then, it began to fade, becoming translucent, ghost-like. Within seconds, it had vanished completely, though sensors still detected its mass. It was there but not there. existing in the dimensional pocket Marcus had created. It worked. Jothik breathed. By the ancestors, it actually worked. Marcus was already expanding the effect. The weapon had a limited range, but he could pulse it repeatedly, creating overlapping dimensional pockets that covered larger and larger areas of space. Each pulse trapped more Vorgrim vessels, removing them from the battlefield without destroying them. But there was a cost. Marcus could see it in the sensor data. Each dimensional fold created a stress point in space-time. Small damage, manageable, but it was adding up. He was essentially perforing reality, punching holes that would take centuries to heal naturally. It was better than the wholesale destruction other weapons would cause. But it was still damage that would last long after this battle ended. "Keep going," Chen urged from the command center. "You're giving the fleet a chance. Our ships are reporting the Vorgrim are disengaging, pulling back to avoid the dimensional pockets." Marcus pulsed the weapon again and again, creating a maze of dimensional barriers that carved up the battlefield. The Vorgrim adapted quickly, learning to avoid the affected areas, but that was fine. By avoiding the barriers, they exposed themselves to conventional weapons in narrow corridors of normal space. The tide of battle began to turn. Council ships that had been running for their lives now found opportunities to strike. The Vorgrim's advantage of invulnerability was broken. They could still absorb energy, but only if they remained in normal space where they were vulnerable to being trapped. Then, Marcus noticed something in the sensor data that made his blood run cold. "They're learning. Look at this. The latest Vorgrim vessels are phasing through the dimensional barriers. They're adapting to exist partially outside normal spacetime." "Can they do that?" Jothik asked. "Apparently yes. They're not just physical beings. They exist partially outside conventional reality. That's probably how they survived in dark space for so long. We trapped the first wave. But the second wave is learning to move through barriers the same way they move through space." "I well free said. I well free saiden. RS Pantsen. With the resin. They sen Rhine." With the first wave, a new alert flashed. The largest Vorgrim ship they had seen yet was emerging from dark space. It was different from the others, more solid, more purposeful. Sensors could barely process its size. It was larger than some planets. "Command vessel," the tactical officer said in a shaking voice. "That has to be their flagship or equivalent." The massive ship moved through the dimensional barriers like they weren't there. It headed directly for Marcus's location, as if it knew exactly where the weapon that had trapped its fleet was located. As if it was intelligent enough to target the source of its problems. Jothik grabbed Marcus's arm. "We need to evacuate. Now." But Marcus was staring at something on his console. A piece of data that had been buried in the architect's archives. "Wait. There's something else." The architects never tried defensive barriers because they gave up too quickly, but they left notes about a theoretical approach. "If I modify the dimensional fold, I can make it two-way." "What does that mean?" "It means instead of just hiding things from the Vorgrim, I can bring something back. Something the architects left behind. Not just their weapons. Them." Marcus pulled up the data. The architects hadn't just uploaded themselves into digital storage. They had encoded their consciousness into quantum patterns that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They weren't really gone. They were just waiting, trapped in a state between existence and non-existence, unable to interact with physical reality. "You want to bring them back?" Jothik's secondary eyes widened. "How?" "The weapons are already manipulating dimensional boundaries. I can expand that effect, create a bridge between the quantum realm where the architects exist and normal space. Give them a way to manifest, even temporarily. Marcus, we don't know what that will do. They've been gone for billions of years. They might not even be sane anymore. We don't have a choice." Look, the command vessel was almost in firing range. Conventional weapons couldn't stop it. The dimensional barriers couldn't hold it, and Marcus didn't have enough time to expand his defenses to protect the entire station. He made the choice his grandmother would have made. He modified the weapon's output, changing it from a defensive barrier to something that had never been attempted. A beacon, a bridge, a door between realms of existence that had been separated for eons. The weapon fired. This time, the pulse was different. It didn't push space-time apart. It pulled it together, connecting points that should never touch. Reality screamed in protest. Alarms blared as the station's hull began to vibrate at frequencies that threatened to shake it apart. And then, through the holes in reality Marcus had created, something answered. The architects returned. They didn't come back as physical beings. They couldn't, their biology was long extinct. Instead, they manifested as patterns of light and energy, consciousness given form by quantum effects and the sheer force of their will to exist. They poured through the dimensional bridges, thousands of them, millions perhaps, all the minds that had uploaded themselves eons ago, rather than face extinction. They weren't whole. They were fragmentary, broken by the ages spent in quantum storage. But they remembered their purpose. They remembered the Vorgrim, and they remembered how to fight. The architects and the Vorgrim met in the space between Harmony 7 and the approaching command vessel. It was a battle that made no sense to conventional sensors, beings of pure information, fighting against entities that existed partially outside normal physics. Energy patterns clashed. Dimensional boundaries shattered and reformed. Reality itself became a weapon as the two ancient enemies resumed a war that had ended billions of years ago. Marcus watched in awe and terror. He had opened a door that couldn't be closed. He had brought back something that might save them, or might consume them, just as surely as the Vorgrim would. The architects weren't the noble saviors from the archives. They were damaged, desperate ghosts, driven by ancient purpose and unfinished business. "What have I done?" Marcus whispered. Jothic stood beside him, all four hands gripping his shoulders. "You did what you had to. Now we see if it's enough." The battle raged on. Beyond human comprehension. Beyond any species' understanding. In the chaos, Marcus could only hope that survival would be worth the price of calling back the dead. 3 months after the Battle of Harmony 7, Marcus Webb stood in a place that shouldn't exist. The dimensional fold around him was stable, more or less. He existed in a space between spaces, a pocket of reality that touched normal space-time but wasn't quite part of it. Through the translucent walls of his prison sanctuary, he could see the universe passing by at normal speed. But for him, time moved differently. A second for him was an hour outside. An hour for him was weeks in the real world. This was the price of victory. This was what he had become. The battle had ended when the architects and Vorgrim destroyed each other. Not defeated, not driven away, mutually annihilated in a clash that left scars across 3 sectors of space. The architects, already fragile after billions of years in quantum storage, had burned themselves out in a final desperate assault. The Vorgrim command vessel and most of its fleet had been torn apart, their exotic matter scattered across dimensions where it would never reform. But the victory was partial. Some Vorgrim survived, trapped in the dimensional pockets Marcus had created. They couldn't escape, couldn't reach normal space to feed, but they still existed, and the dimensional barriers Marcus had used to trap them were unstable. They needed constant maintenance, constant adjustment, or they would collapse and release the Vorgrim back into normal space. Someone had to maintain them. Someone who understood the architect's weapons and could manipulate space-time directly. Someone who could exist partially outside normal reality to access the quantum structures the barriers depended on. Marcus had volunteered before anyone could ask. The transformation had been agonizing. The architect's final gift, or curse, had been a modification to the weapon Marcus had used to summon them. A modification that could reshape a living being's relationship with space-time, allowing them to exist in the gaps between moments, to perceive and manipulate the dimensional barriers from inside. He was no longer fully human. He aged differently now, experienced time non-linearly, saw reality from perspectives that would drive most minds insane. But he could do what needed to be done. He could keep the barriers stable. He could keep the galaxy safe from the trapped Vorgrim. He could visit the real world, but only briefly. The longer he stayed in normal space-time, the more damage his altered existence caused to reality around him. So he lived here, in the spaces between, appearing to others as a ghost or a memory, present, but not quite real. A familiar form materialized nearby. Jothic had learned to navigate the dimensional folds to visit him. She appeared translucent in this space, her forearms barely visible, but her presence was comforting. "You need to see this," she said, without preamble. Time was precious in these visits. The Council has made their decision about humanity. Marcus manifested more fully, pulling himself closer to normal space to interact with her clearly. "And you have a seat on the Council. Full membership. 43 species voted in favor. 4 abstained. None voted against." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "They're afraid of us." "Terrified," Jothic confirmed. "Humanity showed them what young species are capable of when desperate. You brought back the architects from extinction. You trapped the Vorgrim. You transformed yourself into something that exists outside normal physical law. Yes, they're afraid. But they also respect that fear. That's more than most young species earn in their first 1,000 years. What about the Promethean Front, Catherine Shaw, and her people?" Jothic's expression darkened. "Tried and convicted of crimes against reality itself. It's a new category of war crime we had to create specifically for them. They're imprisoned in a null vault, similar to where you exist, except they have no perception, no awareness. They'll serve 1,000 years, which will feel like moments to them, and when they're released, the galaxy will be different enough that their extremism will seem ancient and irrelevant." "Harsh," Marcus said. "Necessary," Jothic corrected. "They created the first dead zone. 3 star systems that will never host life again. The Council needed to send a message the Architect's weapons are not toys for ambitious fools." Marcus drifted through his dimensional space, looking out at the galaxy beyond. He could see more than before his transformation. He saw the energy flows between stars, the subtle vibrations of space-time, the scars left by the battle. The galaxy was beautiful and fragile in ways he had never appreciated when he was fully human. "How is Earth?" he asked. "Thriving, in a strange way," Jothic reported. "Your sun aged 100 years during the battle when you activated all the dimensional weapons at once. It's hotter now, putting out more energy. But instead of seeing it as a disaster, humans built a massive array of orbital solar collectors. Earth is generating more power than any 3 council worlds combined. You've become an energy superpower, practically overnight. My mother? Dr. Webb is well. She completed your research on responsible advancement. It's become required reading for every council species. She's been nominated for the Architect's Prize the first time they've awarded it in 3,000 years. Jothic paused. She asks about you every time I see her. Tell her I'm fine, Marcus said automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. He wasn't fine. He wasn't even really human anymore. But what else could he say? Jothic moved closer, her form solidifying slightly. There's something else you need to know. The Vorgrim you trapped aren't dormant. They're learning. They're adapting to the dimensional barriers, trying to find weaknesses. It's slow, we're talking centuries before they could potentially break free, but it's happening. Marcus had suspected as much. The Vorgrim were survivors, evolved to overcome any obstacle. Trapping them had bought time, not ended the threat. Then I'll need to keep adjusting the barriers, keep them contained. For how long? Forever? Probably. Or until someone smarter than me figures out how to actually destroy them without destroying reality in the process. He tried to smile. At least I won't get bored. Marcus, you can't exist like this indefinitely. Your body, your mind, they're not meant for this kind of existence. Eventually, you'll fade, become purely quantum patterns like the architects. You'll lose yourself. I know. He had done the calculations. He had maybe 500 years, subjective time, before his consciousness degraded too far to maintain coherence, longer than a normal human lifetime. But not forever. But 500 years of me is worth protecting billions of lives across thousands of worlds. The math is simple. Math is simple. Zothic reached out with one hand, passing it through his semi-substantial form. I hate that you're right. I hate that this is what victory looks like. They stood in silence for a while. Two friends separated by dimensional barriers and the cruel necessities of survival. Finally, Zothic had to leave. Spending too long in the dimensional folds would start affecting her biology, and Marcus couldn't bear the thought of hurting her. After she left, Marcus resumed his work. He drifted through the dimensional barriers, adjusting quantum states, strengthening weak points, monitoring the trapped Vorgrim for any sign of breakthrough. It was lonely work, but it was important, essential. Sometimes, he visited the real world. He appeared briefly to council meetings, offering advice on dimensional physics and the weapons that were now sealed in a secure vault. He appeared at his mother's bedside when she was ill, a translucent ghost holding her hand through the long night. He appeared at memorial ceremonies for the millions who died in the Vorgrim attacks, a silent witness to the cost of survival. And sometimes, he visited the Prometheus Memorial on Luna. The ship had been restored and placed in a museum, its hull polished, its interior preserved exactly as it had been when it returned. Visitors could walk its corridors, see the empty chairs where the crew had died, read the logs that Captain Vasquez had left behind. Marcus would stand in the captain's quarters, looking at his grandmother's personal effects still arranged on her desk. A photo of family, a handwritten journal, a small Earth flag she had kept to plant on new worlds. Did you know it would end like this? He asked the empty room. No answer came, of course. But Marcus liked to think his grandmother would understand. She had made her choice, knowing it would cost everything. Now, he made the same choice, paying the same price. Years passed, decades. The galaxy adapted to its new reality. Humanity spread across the stars, their reputation preceding them the species that had called back the dead to fight ancient enemies. Other young species looked at humans with a mixture of fear and admiration. Old species treated them with careful respect, the way one might treat a powerful neighbor with unpredictable tendencies. The council reorganized itself. The doctrine of measured progress was rewritten to acknowledge that sometimes survival required risks. The weapons remained sealed, but the knowledge of how to use them was preserved, just in case. Earth built its Dyson sphere, a massive array of orbital structures that captured the increased output of their aged sun. They became the energy hub of their region of space, selling power to 100 worlds. Prosperity came from the same disaster that could have destroyed them. And in the dimensional folds, Marcus continued his eternal watch. He aged slowly, his perception of time becoming increasingly non-linear. He existed in multiple moments simultaneously, watching the past, present, and potential futures overlap and diverge. His humanity faded gradually, replaced by something else. Not quite architect, not quite human, something new. Zothic visited when she could. She aged normally, and Marcus watched his friend grow old, with a sadness that transcended words. She retired from active service, then took an advisory role, then finally accepted that her time was limited. Don't mourn me, she told him on one of their final visits. I lived a full life. I saw wonders most species only dream of. I counted a transdimensional human ghost among my closest friends. That's not a bad legacy. After she died, Marcus felt more alone than ever. But the work continued. The Vorgrim tested the barriers. He strengthened them. Reality needed maintaining. He maintained it. The galaxy turned, and he existed outside its normal flow, a guardian in the spaces between spaces. Centuries passed. The council evolved. New species joined. Old rivalries faded. The memory of the Vorgrim War became history, then legend, then myth. But Marcus remained, ensuring the legends didn't become real again. He received visitors occasionally. Scientists studying dimensional physics. Historians researching the war. His great-great-grandchildren, who looked at him with awe and confusion, unable to comprehend the family member who existed outside of time. And sometimes, late in the nights that didn't exist in his dimensional fold, Marcus wondered what the architects had felt in their final days. Had they regretted their choice? Had they wished they had found another way? Or had they accepted that some prices must be paid, some sacrifices made, for civilization to continue? He thought he understood them now. The architects hadn't failed. They had made the only choice that allowed anything to survive at all. They had paid the price of power with their own existence, and they had done it willingly. Now Marcus did the same. He existed in quantum patterns, in dimensional folds, in the spaces between heartbeats. He was no longer human in any conventional sense, but he was still human enough to remember why he made this choice. He was still human enough to keep making it, day after day, century after century. The galaxy lived on. Trillions of beings across thousands of worlds lived their lives, loved, dreamed, built, and died, never knowing that their existence depended on a transformed human living in the gaps of reality, maintaining barriers against ancient horrors. But Marcus knew. And that was enough. In the restored Prometheus Memorial, a new plaque hung beside his grandmother's. It read, Dr. Marcus Webb, grandson of Captain Elena Vasquez. He reached beyond human limits and learned to live there. He transformed himself into a guardian of reality itself, so that others need not. Every civilization faces the choice, power or wisdom. Humanity chose both. Marcus Webb embodies the cost of that choice. Eternal service in exchange for survival. May we never forget what he sacrificed, and may we never need another to follow his path. And in the dimensional folds between normal space, Marcus smiled. They had gotten the last part wrong. They would need others, eventually. The Vorgrim would adapt, eventually. New threats would emerge eventually. But that was a problem for future generations. For now, the galaxy was safe. For now, humanity had proven they could wield terrible power and still choose responsibility over domination. They had earned their place among the ancient species, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. And somewhere in the quantum spaces that touched all of reality, a fragment of consciousness that had once been named Marcus Webb continued its watch, patient and eternal, ensuring that the weapons no civilization should possess would only be used when no other choice remained. The stars turned. Time flowed. And in the spaces between, a guardian maintained his vigil, paying the price so others would not have to. It was enough.